Yeah, I would agree. We've missed the start of that for some reason. There's an internet issue I've had at my end, Ian. So
Okay.
just to recap,
We'll start again.
from our perspective, the injury crisis at Newcastle, it's a bad one. We've had them before in the past, but this one seems to be particularly bad. But a couple of players could be back in time after the international break, Ian.
Yeah, it looks like, well, Gimenez will be back because he'll have completed his one-match ban. Isak will be back, of course, or at least we think so. And I don't think Almiron's injury reports from to suggest he's not as bad as first feared. But hey, listen, well, Newcastle fans all keep their fingers crossed that the international break, no more injuries. It's ironic, isn't it? Kieran Trippier was talking the other day about how the international breaks come just in time. Everyone can get their get a little bit of energy back in themselves, but he's one of the ones who's away, isn't he?
Yeah. So, he's one who could potentially, pick up an injury. Let's hope not. Ultimately, there's been a little bit of stuff in the media with regards to, is it down to the training? Is it down to the fact that, we play this high energy, high press kind of game? What's your thoughts on it? Is it because we're playing more games?
Look, let's go back a few years. Can you remember about 15, 18 years ago during Graham Souness's time? And he was convinced that Newcastle were picking up injuries because it was the wrong kind of grass. And during his traumatic period at Newcastle, he actually moved the Newcastle first team squad to the academy. And the academy players trained at Benton. So he obviously didn't care much about whether they picked up injuries, but it was nonsense, of course, wasn't it? Wrong kind of grass and all that. But yeah, listen, Newcastle do play a high-intensive game. That's going to be part of it. The fact that they have very, very few clear weeks, that's going to be part of it as well. And of course, a lot of it's down to ill luck. Last season, Newcastle were pretty fortunate on the injury front, weren't they? I think the defence barely changed. Yes, Callum Wilson was out for a while, and Isak, but Callum Wilson has had a history of injuries, and so and then in midfield it was relatively okay. So things do even themselves out over a period of time.
I guess there's always a silver lining to these kind of things, and it gives an opportunity for some of the youngsters to come through. We've heard the names of a lot of these youngsters in and around, the academy and those who progressed into the under 21s, under 23s. But Ben Parkinson, Diallo, and Lewis Miley, all having an opportunity to break in and follow in the footsteps of Elliot Anderson, who's secured a place now in that first team squad. He's out injured, of course, at the moment. Let's look at Lewis Miley. He's just won another award. The Sport Newcastle dinner, which was the back end of last week, the War Jackie Trophy. He won an award previous to that at Sport Newcastle the previous year. 17 years of age, the youngest player to play in the Champions League for Newcastle United, and now officially the youngest player to play in the Premier League for Newcastle United. So, he doesn't look out of place, Ian, does he?
I can remember the lads, my fellow journalists who were away in the pre-season tour, and they came back, and everyone was wanting to know about Tonali and the new signings, and the name on everyone's lips was Lewis Miley. They were saying he was absolutely frightening. And then a few days later, we went to the premiere of the Amazon documentary, and we were chatting to Sean Longstaff, and Sean Longstaff said he's the best kid he's ever seen, and he said it's just a pity he plays in my position. He played against Manchester City in the Carabao Cup, didn't he? And I think the game passed him by. Did he come off at half time, from what I remember?
Yeah.
But he was one of the better performers against Bournemouth. Not that there were too many contenders, but listen, he's clearly a prospect. I know people who say that the best two kids of that age in the country are in the Northeast, himself and Chris Rigg at Sunderland. So, yeah, he's obviously got a bright future. The guy I feel really sorry for, Steve, is Anderson, because everybody thought this would have been the perfect chance for him, wouldn't it? But he's going to be out for a few more weeks now.
Yeah, it would have been a good opportunity for him to cement his place in the first team and make it difficult, certainly, for Eddie Howe when when the players come back. But yeah, as I say, it's a silver lining, those youngsters getting an opportunity to have a run out and to potentially make a little bit of a name for themselves, get that experience as well, which is what they want. The 2-week break is massively beneficial to Newcastle. We've already discussed that at the top of the programme.
Providing there's no, so many are on international duty, you are having to keep your fingers crossed.
Providing there's no extra injuries, you're right there. We've talked obviously about the fixture pile-up. The Champions League, though, I mean, first time in 20-odd years Newcastle have been in the Champions League. We had that wonderful night, of course, at St James's Park where we beat PSG 4-1. A creditable 0-0 draw in AC Milan. AC Milan probably felt aggrieved that they didn't get the win that night. But since then, 2 defeats, back-to-back defeats against Dortmund. What have you made of our overall performances in the Champions League?
There was an element of good fortune about the draw at the San Siro. The performance against Paris Saint-Germain was outstanding, but PSG at that stage, I thought they were a team, they were all for coat, no knickers. Now, Borussia Dortmund had the knickers on. Very savvy, very efficient, very well organised, deserved the win at St James's Park, and I expected them to win in Germany as well. I think a lot of Newcastle fans did. And I've got friends of mine that said we still had a great time. It was just about going over for the crack, for the kinship, and for the experience. So I did expect Dortmund to win last week, and they won relatively comfortably. I suspect they might still have won if Newcastle had a full strength squad. I'll be honest there. Of course, the Champions League this year. I always thought that Newcastle were going for third place. Now, Paris Saint-Germain, as I said, looked very vulnerable at St James's Park. I think they will be a different proposition at their own place. And then AC Milan, well, it's a bit difficult because they're not the great AC Milan of old, are they? But if they need to come to St James's Park, needing a draw, for instance, to qualify in second spot or maybe even third spot, I think we're going to see all the dark arts of Italian football coming out that night. But listen, everybody says, and everybody is right in saying, Newcastle are ahead of schedule. So does that beg the question, is this just a bonus? Is the Champions League a bonus? Eddie Howe wouldn't say so. As he says, he's in it to win it. But it's funny, isn't it? Just a few weeks ago, Kevin Keegan did the talking with Eddie, and he said, why not? Why can't we win? It's typical Kevin. But listen, I don't think Newcastle fans will lose any sleep if Newcastle don't get in the top two. But of course, they still could do it. After all, they did it back in Bobby's day, didn't it? After losing the first 3 games. So, if you want to look at it that way, Newcastle are in a better position now than they were 20 years ago.
What's your mindset with regards to finishing third? I mean, potentially we could go into the Europa. It's more midweek games, it's Thursday night games. There's a mindset that says, well, go into Europa and win it. I've got to be honest. For me, my priority would be to go out of Europe and to concentrate on the Carabao Cup game, the game against Chelsea away, get through the semi-finals and hopefully get another favourable draw. Maybe another big team, just to round it all off and do it the hard way. Yeah. But then concentrate on the Premier League. Go into the new year. You've got the FA Cup, of course. We might get a run in that, but get your place in that top, that top 4, top 5 again this season. But get to the Carabao Cup final and put it right. Get a win. That would be what I would prefer. I've enjoyed the European journey so far. I'll enjoy the final couple of games, but we went in a bit. We've gone in too early, ahead of schedule. I wouldn't be too bothered if we went out. What about you, Ian?
Well, I think you make an interesting point there. It'd be interesting to know what all the other fans think. Would they rather finish third and go to the Europa, or would they rather finish bottom and concentrate in the other competitions? I think you make a good point there. I'll just make 2 points. You mentioned the Carabao Cup. Now, we've just seen one of the greatest Premier League games of all time, Chelsea 4, Man City 4. I know that Micah Richards has been raving about Chelsea for a long time. I think they're going to come good. Chelsea look a side full of quality. They've got an outstanding coach. I think Newcastle are possibly coming up against them both in the league and the cup at the wrong time. That game at Stamford Bridge will be very, very, very tough. You know, it's hardly a reward for beating the two Manchester clubs, is it? Stamford Bridge. So, you know, I would say that game, I know it's a few weeks down the line, there should be more players available again, but that's going to be tough, as is the game at St. James's Park after the international break. When you look at the league, last season, I think I mentioned on the show last time, a lot of things conspired to boost Newcastle's Champions League prospects last season. Now, Newcastle finishing fourth was no fluke. No way at all. Deserved it. But what was fortuitous was that three of the Premier League powerhouses had, for them, disastrous seasons. Liverpool, Tottenham, Chelsea. This season, if you look at the league table now, when Newcastle are in 7th place, and I would say that's probably just about where they should be. But you look at those 6 sides above them, they're all going to take some shifting. Yes, even Manchester United. Now, they haven't been playing well, but apparently the records say they're the most informed side in the Premier League. They've won 4 out of the last 5. Rashford isn't going to be drawing a blank week after week, which he has been so far. Hoyland's going to settle down, and they've got a full defence to come back. Chelsea, who are behind Newcastle, as I said, I think they're going to be good. Liverpool are revitalised. Tottenham, yes, they've had 2 defeats, but they're revitalised under Ange Postecoglou. So it's going to be a very, very tough league. I'll tell you what, Steve, there will be a very decent side who finishes 8th and misses out on Europe, because and then we haven't mentioned the likes of the Brightons and West Hams who've got decent pedigree as well. This is a tougher Premier Division than last season. Which
other teams have impressed you so far?
I was just incredibly impressed with Chelsea yesterday. I think, I know it. Listen, everyone's talking about it, but I think Palmer looks an outstanding talent. And of course, they've got the striker, I've forgotten his name, who got injured out in the States before seeing he's close to fitness again. And Jack Jackson's beginning to score goals. I'm a big fan of Pochettino. I think Chelsea they'll certainly finish higher than they are now. Because of my Celtic allegiances, I was telling everyone what a great coach Ange Postecoglou is. I think he's so far proving me right. Of course, Newcastle fans are bemoaning injuries. So are Spurs fans right now. It's probably with the exception of Son, their 2 best players are out to the new year, Maddison and Van der Ven. But they're going to be good. Arsenal, I think they've developed a mean streak. And of course, they've still got the likes of Gabriel Jesus to come back fully fit. So, as I say, obviously Man City, I could go on. All the sides at the top of the division are impressing me.
So, who's impressed you at Newcastle this season? I mean, we've had some impressive games, some impressive performances. Beaten Manchester United, beaten Manchester City, beaten PSG. Any player that stood out for you that maybe you didn't expect?
Didn't expect. Well, I'll just say the person who I've been very impressed with, Sean Longstaff. I'm a fan of his, but I did expect Steve. Newcastle were missing something. I remember the last time we spoke was, they'd been hammered at Brighton, and that midfield was not working. It wasn't working particularly well. And Sean Longstaff, he's got what I call football intelligence. He's got nous. He knows where he has to be, and also he's got incredible industry. You know, he's an artisan, but he's an artist at times as well. So he impressed me. Kieran Trippier is arguably the most influential signing I can recall at Newcastle. I mean, okay, where he's not, ironically though, and I think most people in the late 50s and beyond might agree with me, he wouldn't be in my best 11. That would be a guy who older fans will remember, Irving Nattrass, who was a real Rolls Royce of a player. But if Kieran Trippier carries on the way he's going, then he certainly will be a contender. Incidentally, I think his form slipped in recent games. it's a pity that he has to go on international duty because of all the players he could do with having his battery recharged. Tell you a story, Steve. A few years ago, Peter Reid was manager of Sunderland, and he used to tell of what Howard Kendall used to do whenever there were internationals on. And he'd call Reedy into his office and he'd say, "How's your hamstring, Peter?" He said, "My hamstring, Gaffer? It's fine. Nothing wrong. No problem at all." "No, how's your hamstring?" "No, it's fine. But you're feeling it a bit tight." "Well, maybe it's a little bit tight, but nothing to worry about. But you're worried it might get a bit worse than Peter?" "Well, maybe. I better give Bobby Robson a ring, pull you out of the squad." and apparently that was his tactic, and a lot of managers did it back in those days. Now, I'm not suggesting Eddie Howe should do that, but these friendlies, there's a lot of managers I'm sure would be very, very tempted to pull their key players out of international squads.
You mentioned Kieran Trippier at the weekend. Of course, there was that much publicised exchange of words with a supporter. Supporters since come out on social media and apologised. I don't think the supporter should have apologised. I knew he was going to get stick on social media, but social media is not the real world. He travelled all the way down to Bournemouth. He had a long journey back. Newcastle, got beat. Didn't particularly put in a great performance. You're entitled to have your opinion if you put it across in a civil way. But Kieran Trippier came over. He's the captain of the team. And he gave him his opinion, and I just thought it was passion from the fans, which you would expect, and passion from a player. But it's done now. Everyone's come out, said their thing, and we'll move on. But it was, I just thought that was passionate.
Yes, we move on. But I'll tell you what, Steve, we're going to get more of this, and I'll tell you why. I mean, the Newcastle fan base, the Toon Army, for want of a better word, they take great pride in the fact that they think everyone's united. But as a club grows, it's inevitable a fan base isn't going to be homogeneous. You're going to have people with different views, different backgrounds, different levels of support. There will be some fans who are regular season ticket holders who are still very uneasy about the Saudi ownership. You'll be others who just forget about it. You've got some fans who think Eddie Howe's the bee's knees and there's no way they'd like him, they want him to leave. Other fans will say, well, you could get too much of maybe a good thing, 4 or 5 years here, then maybe go off for the England job. Newcastle's fan base is no longer Geordie exiles and people living in Tyneside and the conurbations. You've now got fans overseas who are Newcastle fans. You're going to have school kids in Buckinghamshire, in Cornwall, in North Wales, who've said, I'm going to support Newcastle. Now, because you're going to have this hodgepodge, for want of a better word, of supporter, they're all going to be different. And so you can't keep a fan base singing out of the same hymn sheet all the time. And I suspect there will be times, and some fans won't like it, when they will hear fans sitting next to them, maybe sitting behind them at home or away, who do shout things which they don't like. I think big clubs have got to get used to that.
Yeah, I think you're right. There is going to be a change in the level of support and the change of where supporters come from, and we've got to accept that. But I think, listen, I've got no problems with somebody like giving an opinion and Kieran Trippier having a word back. But the support from the away end after that incident was spoke volumes. People singing Kieran Trippier's name, and the majority of the fans 100% behind the team. Of course, as always, mate. It always
will be a minority. It always will be a minority, but there will be that minority, because you can't expect 100% of people to agree with 100% of views 100% of the time, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I completely do. Obviously, we've got this big Premier League vote coming up, Ian, which it really does feel as if, again, the Premier League are almost trying to put a couple of traffic cones in the way of Newcastle potentially doing anything which they would deem, something that would gain Newcastle an advantage. I mean, some of us call us paranoid, but it does feel as if that particular rule is aimed at one club and one club only, and that's Newcastle. What's your thoughts on it? Do you think the Premier League club will vote this through?
Well, I do. I think it's 14 out of the 20 they need, and I think it will. Got to remember, had Premier League chairman had their way, the chances are this ownership wouldn't have got voted through. It was, we suspect at a higher level, Boris Johnson, had words with the Premier League. So we think that's happened. Listen, Steve, I can understand the other club's view. Is it fair that Newcastle can pick up loan players from the 4 Saudi clubs owned by the PAF? Possibly not. Possibly not. Mind you, no club should be able to as well, by the way. So I don't think it should just be for Newcastle. We're talking a whole new era of football when states are owning football clubs. And let's face it, it is a state owning Newcastle. So other clubs aren't going to like it. Now, you can look at it one way and you can say, well, this is aimed as a selfish act against these upstarts called Newcastle United. Or you can say this is a rule that should have been in the first place, but because, the environment has changed, we need to protect for further time. So I can understand it. And I think it will happen.
Surely, though, the rules which are set in place at the start of a season shouldn't be changed halfway through a season, Ian.
It's up to the Premier League, isn't it? I can see that argument, but at the beginning of the season, it wasn't really on the agenda, was it? Nobody actually said, "Oh well, what? Supposing Newcastle go off to Saudi, go and get a loan player from one of their clubs." I think obviously this is before Neves went over there. Neves is a good player, and it would be a good option for Newcastle. But listen, I just think that football is in this, I suppose, changing world whereby the ownerships have become superpowers in themselves. That the rule book is outdated, and I think, all right, they're changing it piecemeal, but I do think it needs to be changed to protect the future of the game.
I think they'll have a legal battle on their hands if they do try to change it. But I mean, look, the paranoia is there. We do think it's about us. I dare say it would affect Manchester City in some way, shape, or form as well. There are other teams that this could affect, not just Newcastle. And I've got to be honest as well, the Neves situation, I mean, it's a name that's been linked with Newcastle, but, there's been no confirmation or denial from Newcastle about it. Eddie Howe said he's not even thinking about the transfer window because of the injury situation. It changes. It's changing from week to week. And what he may need now, he might not need in January. So you couldn't understand. There will have been a degree of planning. There's no way in the world we're working in this Mike Ashley kind of way now, where we're going into the transfer window without even thinking about it and seeing what we can pick up at the end of it. Well, we will be planning these things far ahead, and Eddie Howe's just very good at not giving anything away.
He won't give anything away, and I think Newcastle fans should have faith in Dan Ashworth. That Dan Ashworth won't have his sight on one target. There'll be 3 or 4 targets, and I would suggest that the other 3 aren't currently playing in Saudi Arabia.
Dan Ashworth has done a good job, no doubt about it. Eddie Howe has done a great job as coach. For me, though, the talking point of the season so far has been off the pitch, and that was the signing of Tonali, and ultimately the ban that he faces now, which takes him through to August next year, and potentially the Premier League also, talking about, maybe looking at, whether there's been any situations developed in this country. I mean, that hasn't been confirmed, but there has been, enough media coverage of that to suggest that it could happen. But we'll just deal with what has happened and what he's been found guilty of, what he's admitted to, and what he's serving his punishment for. What was your thoughts on that, Ian? What take did you have on that?
I don't think there's anybody who says he's been dealt harshly. I think it's bad luck for Newcastle United. You can feel sorry for the player as an individual if he has got a gambling addiction, which is a medical affliction. He's done wrong. He's broken the rules, which I think every modern day footballer is very, very aware about. And, when I made a few inquiries and looked at it could be a 3-year ban, I think there was an element of relief that he will be back next August. What I find strange, Steve, is reading between the lines, he can train with Newcastle, and then he'd be available again next August. But as part of the punishment, he can be called back to Italy. Now, am I right? 16 times to participate in some community service. Now, can that be at a moment's notice? Can the Italian FA call him on a Friday before a big home game against Liverpool, for instance? I don't know that. So I don't think it's a straightforward case of that, that he is available again and the slate swiped clean next August.
Yeah, some of it can be done online, so I think that would get around it.
Some of it, yes,
some of it can be done online, but interesting to see how all of that pans out, and hopefully, he doesn't get an investigation. I think the punishment is
we don't know, do we?
No, we don't. The punishment suits the crime for me.
Okay. By the way, there's one there's some people who are suggesting we might never see him back in the Northeast again. Maybe Newcastle do cut the losses. I don't think that will happen. I think they'll continue to give him pastoral support. But yes, he's been missed. But as I say, at the time of the sentence, Newcastle fans, I would have said, if there'd been a straw poll, what Newcastle's midfield should have been at that moment, I don't think he'd have been in it. I think it would have been Joelinton, Guimaraes and Sean Longstaff.
Well, I mean, I've got to be honest. He looked as if he had the worries of the world on his shoulders prior to the season starting. I mean, I think most of us just put it down to his demeanour. That's the way he is, and even from being shown around the club, there was comments I remember on social media about saying his wife looked happier to be here than him. But I mean, I guess when you've got this building up behind the scenes, we don't know how early he would have known that the storm was brewing. But from our perspective, that would probably answer a lot of questions. So hopefully, he does stay, he does come back, and we see a completely different player, in August next year. But we will watch that with interest. Just before we go to the ad break, Newcastle also announced last week that Marcel Bout was going to be the new chief scout. He's going to be looking for players around the world, age 16 to 23. Works for Louis van Gaal, of course, also worked at Bayern Munich as well, and with the Netherlands national team. This is a big name to bring in behind the scenes, isn't it, to help the likes of Dan Ashworth?
Listen, Newcastle's scouting's been as good as anyone's over the last couple of years, hasn't it? There hasn't, I know we've just talked about Denali, but I wouldn't describe him as a dud signing. There hasn't been a dud signing in the last few years. So do Newcastle need extra scouts? Well, as their ambitions grow, as their resources grow, they'll be scouring the world for talent, but you can only judge a scout after a few years, can't you?
Yeah, interesting. An interesting appointment, one I think, which will certainly help Newcastle develop. Okay, we're halfway through the show. It's time for the ads. A big thanks to all our sponsors: Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay as you go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. You can find out more about them from their website, mrvickies.co.uk, or by calling 01768 210 102. Thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And thanks to United Group Travel, UK coach holiday firm based in Morpeth. There's no strangers on their tours, just people you haven't met yet. They're now taking bookings for 2024. You can call 01670 632 460, 0791 666 4174, or 07957 141 654. Or go to the website unitedgrouptravel.com. Please subscribe to the channel. Hit the subscribe button underneath the video today. We still do 7 shows a week. Hit the thumb up under the video to like it. It does us a big favour. Click share to share to your other social media and let people know about NUFC matters. We're also a podcast. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast providers. If you want to help the show financially, you can take out a £25 one-off membership. You get a scarf, a pen, a cup, and a membership card. How do you get it? Go to nufcmatters.com, look for membership, If you've got a smartphone, then put your smartphone over the QR code and it will take you straight to that section on the website. We also support the food bank on this channel. You can donate to the food bank today by going to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk. We do support events on this channel as well. If you've got an event, please send it in and we'll promote it. The Tyne Theatre and Opera House are doing a Keegan, Beardsley and Waddle event, the Class of 84, 25th of January 2024. Book now by calling 0844 249 1000. And the Tyneside Irish Centre, they're doing an event with Frank Clark and John Gibson on Thursday, December the 7th. You can get tickets from nufcmatters.com and they are priced at £15. There's also some tickets available on Groupon. Don't forget, you can catch me 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, with Rye, Dave and Daz on the Northeast Footy Brekkie Show, 7 till 9, and you can catch us on the Red, the Toon and the Cat and on Toon Radio's website. WhatsApp us on the day 0330 043 2002, the perfect way to start your day. Okay, welcome back to NUFC Matters. Ian Murtagh is on the show. We're still doing the same stuff on the radio station. How's your show going, Ian, by the way, on the Toon Radio?
Going very, very well indeed. I chatted on Friday with, don't know if you know him, Anthony Vickers. He's a Middlesbrough historian. He's just released a book called The Games That Shaped the Borough. Outstanding book. He's a great writer. And of course, one of them was the game that never was against Blackburn way back in '96, if you remember, when they were deducted points, which ultimately led to relegation. But anyway, I digress. We found out later that there were a lot of Northeast football fans from the three clubs all listening to it in a big bar in Lanzarote. So the message travelled far. Good news.
Yeah, fantastic. Getting back to Newcastle United, one player for me that stood out is Jamal Lascelles, somebody who got a little bit of criticism, from fans in the past, but somebody who's always stood up and be counted. When Newcastle were struggling under Ashley in front of a dressing room full of older players, he after a pretty bad defeat, Jamal Lascelles put his head above the parapet. But he's come in, and I think people groaned when they saw he was coming in to replace Sven Botman. But the biggest compliment they can pay Botman is we've not really missed him.
Correct. That game was Southampton, wasn't it? In the roughest time. Yeah. I mean, it was an inspired decision by Benitez to make him the captain. He's always been a captain. Last season, if you remember, I think he picked up 2 yellow cards when he wasn't playing. His antics on the touchline. But in the close season, I know Luton Town were interested in him, and I'll be honest, I expected him to leave. I think most fans wouldn't have just expected him to have left. They'd have given him a fond farewell, but I don't think they'd have mourned too long. But I think we all should eat our words to some extent and give him a pat on the back. Yeah, he's been outstanding. He's always been a good organizer. That's why he was a captain. But I think his performances have been good, not just from a defensive point of view. He's looked a lot more comfortable on the ball than he previously has. A lot of that might be to do with the fact he's got the likes of Cher and Trippier alongside him. But yeah, great performance. And I think he'd probably be in contention for Newcastle's Player of the Month for November, wouldn't he?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. He's been outstanding. Really, really played well. The last line of your defence, of course, is your goalkeeper, Nick Pope. For me, has played some great games this season. Bournemouth, he kept the score down. 4, 5, 6 wonderful saves against Bournemouth. Not the best team performance, but he certainly earned his corn. But he's not getting recognition for England, and with the injury crisis, we're probably happy about that this time round. But why do you think he's fallen out of the reckoning with Southgate?
I think it's to do with his distribution. It all started last year. Maybe that's fair. It's not fair, but there have been 1 or 2 high-profile mistakes with his feet. There was one at Brighton earlier this season. Of course, there was the Liverpool sending off last season. As a shot stopper, he's outstanding. I think that was that the most shots he's faced since he's been in Newcastle against Bournemouth. Was it 10 shots on target that the Cherries had? that save right at the end was absolutely outstanding. I mean, his reflexes are as good as anyone. He commands his box pretty well. But, yeah, as I say, he isn't the most comfortable with his feet. He's worked on it. I can't remember too many mistakes since down on the South Coast. But that's the only theory we can have why he's lost his place in the England squad, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean it's head scratching for me. I mean it can only be something like that.
Yeah.
Something technical, which Southgate thinks the other three goalkeepers who he's selecting are better at. Anthony Gordon as well has been knocking on the door. We've already spoken about Sean Longstaff. I think most of us feel will get England recognition at some point. But Anthony Gordon's another one. He had a great summer. We discussed that the first time you were on the show, Ian, but he had a great summer at the younger level. But is he too far away, do you think, from an England call up?
Do you know what? I don't think he is, but I think he's further away than he was 48 hours ago, because Palmer at Chelsea, I think, plays in a pretty similar position in that he's an attacking player, but not normally through the middle. And I think maybe Gordon was someone on Southgate's mind when a few players dropped out. But Palmer's stunning display at Stamford Bridge in the 4-4 draw against Manchester City might have got him the nod. But I do like Anthony Gordon. I liked him at Everton as well. He's got an edginess, which, I always remember Bobby Robson used to say, he said, if the opposition fans don't like you, you're doing something right. And of course, Newcastle fans couldn't stand him when he was at Everton, could they? And I'm sure most sets of fans up and down the country don't like him now. He's wearing a black and white shirt. But yeah, he's a good player. I love it. He's got speed, he's got attitude, and his work rate is voracious.
One thing we constantly talk about on this show and on the Northeast Footy Brekkie show on the Toon Radio is those three letters, VAR. And VAR really has come to the forefront on more than one occasion in different games in the Premier League. Most recently for Newcastle, of course, the Arsenal home game where Gordon's goal was checked not once, not twice, but three times for three different things that it could have been ruled out for. Just the latest in a long line of farcical VAR, VAR viewings and it's killing the game. What's your thoughts on this? Because the Premier League now are talking about potentially not renewing their contract with Hawkeye at the end of the 24-25 season. I keep saying this, and I know I'm not the only person. It's the people running the VAR. It's not the equipment. It's not the technology. For me, it's the people who are in charge of it that need to be either trained better, or the rules need to be simplified so people know exactly what they're looking for. Because at the moment, we're getting worse rather than better, Ian.
Right. Well, I banned it from my show, but just for you, Steve, I'll talk about it.
Thank you.
I think it's destroying football. I'd scrap it tomorrow. Newcastle, last season, they probably got the wrong end of VAR. I think it's earned them points this season. The penalty at Wolves. And I don't think that Gordon's goal should have stood against Arsenal. Now, before people shout at me, I think there's a good criteria. How would you have felt if that goal had been scored against you? And if there'd be an outcry, then I think you turn the tables. I thought, listen, in Sunday morning football, I played centre half very badly, and I conceded penalties for what Jolinton did to somebody. When you can't put two hands on the back of somebody. That's by the by. VAR is basically all it's doing is just turning football into American football. You've got matches that are going to last 2 hours plus now. The referees are scared to overturn Stockley Park. Stockley Park are so scared that there's a repeat of the Tottenham-Liverpool fiasco that they're spending minute upon minute upon minute looking at matters. And the fact of the matter is, Steve, there is still the same amount of subjectivity as there was when it was just the referee and the two linesmen. So I've heard talk about maybe making the line across the pitch thicker to give attackers the benefit of the doubt. But listen, this was the greatest game in the world long before VAR came out. And, you know, it's a cliche, but if something isn't broken, don't try and fix it.
Yeah, it's and it's something that can't be changed mid-season. That definitely can't be changed mid-season because it would be unfair on everyone who's had a decision.
Correct. I suspect it could change at all. I mean, people might argue that it's there now, and we're stuck with it. But I think it can change.
Okay. Yeah, me too. Scrap it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I would.
Go back to the good old days. Go back to the good old days.
You look at some, you know, as journalists, the guys writing on the Arsenal game. Now, there were some magnificent reports, but 80% of the copy was about VAR. Now, yes, quite rightly, because that's what the outstanding fact of the game was. But let's get it back to football.
Yeah, exactly. Back to football we go as well. Manchester City's boss Pep Guardiola was asked about Calvin Phillips in one of his latest press conferences, and asked whether he would consider letting him go to a Premier League rival. And it was TalkSport about when Raheem Sterling moved to Chelsea. He said he would never stand in the way of a player. From his point of view, he said he would, and he said it to the club many times. He gives his opinion to the club, and they decide if the transfer suits for both sides and the player. So obviously, Calvin Phillips has been linked with Newcastle on more than one occasion. Is that a kind of player you'd like to see come in January?
It's interesting, Pep Guardiola, because he was asked again after Palmer got the 97th-minute penalty yesterday. Do you regret selling him? And he doesn't regret selling players. I think he's got so much confidence in his own ability. But that's by the by. Calvin Phillips, sorry, he was an outstanding player at Leeds. He did well in the Euros. He's done nothing at Manchester City. Is there a guarantee that we'd see the Leeds United Calvin Phillips if he came to Newcastle? I don't think there is. I'll give you an example. It's not a perfect comparison, but Danny Drinkwater at Leicester, who's just recently announced his retirement. Wonderful player at Leicester, went to Chelsea, did nothing, couldn't revive his career after that hiatus. Listen, I mean, he's an obvious player to be linked because his current club look as if they will sell him or loan him out. Newcastle are a little bit short of numbers in midfield. I would say the odds are against him ending up at St. James's Park, but I wouldn't totally rule it out.
You'll have your ear to the ground, Ian. Who do you think Newcastle, may end up with or may go for? And where do you think we need to strengthen in this January transfer window? When you look at the injuries and the players who are out, most of them, will be back by January.
Yeah.
So, we should have a packed dressing room again by then. Do you think we'll see a lot of action?
Well, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? And as soon as you get injuries, we all say they should have strengthened in that position. First of all, the signings in the summer came out of the blue. No one until a week or so until he arrived knew Livramento was coming. Same with Tonali, same with Hall. Harvey Barnes was slightly different. We knew there was interest in Harvey Barnes. I would suspect Newcastle, they will be looking at bringing in a striker of promise. Now, I'm not talking an 18, 19-year-old. I think they will be looking to sign a young striker with the most of his career ahead of him. I think that might be one of the priorities. Again, the rest does depend on injuries. I would have said centre-half, but as we talked earlier in the show, Steve, Lascelles is a more than capable deputy for either Schär or Botman. The fullback berths look covered now. Goalkeeping is well covered. It's the wide positions that aren't, but that's more to do with injuries. So I would say that the club are very much focused in the medium to long term to bringing in a striker who they believe can blossom into an outstanding goal scorer.
You touched on Tino Livramento there. I mean, what a snip he's looking, by the way.
Well, he is, isn't he? Outstanding. Absolutely outstanding. I'm not saying I had my doubts, but when they signed him for such a big sum of money, I thought, well, this is a guy who he hasn't played much football and he's coming back from a very, very serious injury. Now, clearly, the club have done the homework there. They've looked at his medical records. They were satisfied and they've been vindicated to be satisfied that the injury was over. Listen, this time next year, will he be the number one right back? Much as we all rate and respect Kieran Trippier, you wouldn't rule it out. This kid's going far.
Yeah, certainly looks the business, and he doesn't look uncomfortable in midfield either.
Well, let's face it, the modern day full-back is as much a midfielder as a defender, aren't they? They've got to cover so much ground, and a lot of teams now you've got with your underlapping full-backs and everything like that, and stepping into midfield. The game's changed so much. There's no such thing as an orthodox left back and orthodox right back.
He hasn't had quite as much game time. Lewis Hall is another name, which a lot of people feel that we may have the next two England fullbacks at the club. But he hasn't quite had the same look, has he? I mean, he got booked early on in Dortmund, which limited his opportunities. Played well at Manchester United, though.
He played very well against Manchester United. Although that was one of the most inept Manchester United performances any of us have ever seen, wasn't it? And that's taking nothing away from Newcastle that day. Dortmund, I think the early booking did affect him, and it was no surprise when he came off. No, he hasn't quite had the same effect as Livramento. I mean, his best performance at St James's Park remains that game he played for Chelsea 12 months ago, just before the World Cup break, when a very poor Chelsea side, he was outstanding. So I don't think there's anything to worry about with him in the long term. And he won't be able to play against Chelsea in the 2 games, we don't think, because he's still a Chelsea asset. But if I'm sure Newcastle will sign him. I'm sure there's a lot more to come from him as well.
How do you rate Eddie Howe's performance this season so far? I mean, his press conferences are always very interesting.
Gives nothing away.
I enjoy watching them. How have you rated him this season? What is this is this a pivotal season for him? Is it an important season for him this season, do you think?
Well, the fans are 100% behind him. The media thinks he's a very good manager, articulate. He won't speak off the record, but that's his choice, and he's no worse for that. We assume that the hierarchy rate him as well, and nobody knows. Nobody knows how the people upstairs will react. But the last time I was on your show, we talked about, it was just after the Liverpool defeat, and we talked. That was probably the one game more than any other this season, Steve, where I think he made quite, I wouldn't say drop clangers, but made significant mistakes with the substitutions. And I think, to be fair to him, he admitted as much afterwards. But you can't knock him. I mean, he has clearly improved a lot of players individually. I don't think there have been too many game plans where the fans have been scratching their head saying, what's he doing? He's clearly got good motivational and management skills, because he's got a happy bunch of players. Even the ones out the side, you don't get the impression that they've got the hump with him. So, listen, last season, he was a 9 out of 10. Maybe so far this season, he's an 8 out of 10. But there's a long way to go.
Yeah, there most certainly is. Talk of Gareth Southgate potentially leaving the England job after the Euros next year. Would you be concerned that Eddie Howe may get asked to do the job?
Well, I certainly think he would be asked. And I don't expect him to be giving any clues right now. I mean, I guess, look at the world of politics. Rishi Sunak said Suella Braverman has my full backing until the day he sacks him. So, it's very similar in football. Of course, no manager is going to come out and say, I would love to be the England manager, unless there were no hopers who knew they had no chance of being the England manager. So we don't really know how much or how little Eddie Howe would want to manage his country. What we do know is he loves being the head coach of Newcastle United. He's got an excellent relationship with Dan Ashworth, and he appears settled. That's all we do know. As for the England thing, he's far too shrewd to give anything away. So, listen, there's nothing to worry about for certainly this season and possibly beyond.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he would certainly be flattered by it, but I think he sees a job that he has to do at Newcastle, and he wants to continue to do that. So I think England, if they do need a new manager next summer, will probably have to look elsewhere. Okay, coming around to the last 5 minutes of the show, just looking ahead really now to the forthcoming games. First of all, the Champions League. What's your gut feeling, Ian? Do you think we'll progress to the later stages, or do you think we're going to drop into the Europa?
My gut feeling is that Paris Saint-Germain will be a very, very different proposition on home soil than were at St. James's Park. They've picked up form domestically as well, we've noted. If I had to make a prediction now, I'd say Newcastle would lose that. AC Milan at home, I think is a different kettle of fish. If Newcastle go into that needing points to get third place, because I think if they lose at Paris, top two would be impossible, then I think Newcastle, I would suspect they would get it. So I would say third place is most likely. I would say fourth place is slightly more likely than second, if that all makes sense.
It does, yeah, it does. And the Carabao Cup game, we touched on it earlier, but Newcastle obviously have to go down to Stamford Bridge. Although we would expect some players to be back, in contention for that game. Should be a little bit more, players available. Certainly should have our forward players back for then, injuries dependent. But how do you see that going? You really think Chelsea are going to be a force to be reckoned with?
I'd love to have played last season's Chelsea in the quarterfinals. I'd love to. I think it's a draw which is becoming harder every time you're seeing Chelsea play now. I really do, Steve. You look at the players who've still got to come back, who are still settling in. Yes, Newcastle will have players back, but I do think the fact it's away from home, the odds are tilted Chelsea's way.
Okay, Ian, great to have you on the show as always, mate. Good luck.
Enjoyed it, Steve.
And people can find you on Toon Radio.
I'm a prophet of doom, aren't I? God.
Well, whenever we manage to get you on, it usually comes up the back of a defeat. So hopefully the next time we get you on, Newcastle will have won a game and we'll be able to chat about that, mate. But people can find you on Toon Radio. When are you on, mate?
We're on again on Friday, 7 till 8. And I know it's an international break coming up and we won't have our predictions, but I'll have a couple of interesting guests and we'll have a good time.
Great stuff, mate. Ian, great to see you, mate. If I don't speak to you before, have a great Christmas and we'll catch you in the new year. Take care, mate.
All the best, Steve. Bye.
We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.